Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Metropole TV. This is The Smart Investor. I'm your host for the next hour. My name is Alikan Sakyo, and it's a pleasure to be with you this evening. We will have a great interview in the second half. That's with the Konza CEO, Engineer Tanui. But let's start with what's been going on today. The first big news is from the World Bank. They made the announcement that they've approved a $750 million loan for Kenya in support of reforms in agriculture, housing, digital technology, and fiscal management. They said the World Bank Board of Directors approved a $750 million International Development Association credit to support the government of Kenya's reforms to enhance inclusive growth, accelerate poverty reduction, and achieve its 2030 objective of becoming a middle-income industrialized country. This was telegraphed over the last few days. We knew this was coming. The speed with which it's come, I must say, is pretty impressive. We were trying to get hold of the World Bank folks yesterday, and I learned they were in Washington, so I knew something was going to happen. This is what Felipe Jaramillo, the World Bank Country Director for Kenya, said. Measures supported by this operation are expected to benefit ordinary Kenyans through better targeting of agricultural subsidies to reach low-income farmers, prosecuting those who engage in fraudulent procurement practices, increasing availability of affordable housing, that's the big four, improving revenue mobilization. This operation creates a foundation for essential reform for fighting corruption, liberalizing markets, and enhancing inclusive growth. You will remember that Ambassador Monica Juma was in America signing a partnership agreement with them not too long ago, and I'm sure that this must have been discussed at that meeting and kind of pre-approved. So development there, but the central bank governor, that Patrick Njoroge, and I love that photograph. I think it's so irreverent, it's fantastic. He was in, I think, Sweden when he got to ride that scooter, but he made some very interesting points. He said Kenya needs to begin reorganizing its debt. He says the room for borrowing has shrunk. Headroom for new borrowing has shrunk since it tapped the Eurobond market this month. It is time for the country to begin reorganizing its debt. His term, of course, is due to end next month. I'm certain, he will get a second term. I think the shilling would definitely, trade to the downside if he didn't. I think he's been a very successful governor, I must say, and very articulate. As advisors of the government, our point is that this is the time to begin working on reorganizing our debt, not in a frantic way, so doing it in the Eliud Kipchoge way. He too is a very keen runner, which is that it's a marathon run and you have to do it in a steady way. When Eliud was on my show, Mindspeak, and I was talking to him, and he said, Ali Khan, I've won the race before I've even begun it, because I've been preparing for 7 months, and I'll never forget that. He already knows he's won when he's at the starting gun. Coming back to the governor of the central bank, it's important to say that the moment for dealing with debt reorganization, looking at debt and itself reorganizing it, that moment has come. He also shaved off 0.4% of the GDP forecast, saying we're not talking drought like we had in 2017, because the rains have arrived, and the question now is, are they adequate? And he also said that the US-China trade dispute had escalated to a full-scale war, which was something I was also talking about over the last couple of days. So that's interesting. He's also worried about Britain's planned exit from the European Union, and he's saying that's another external risk. But as I said, if you want to forecast the Kenyan and African economy, you've also got to be a weather forecaster. And essentially, He's saying that he's not sure whether we're going to get the normal rain cycle. It came late. It's coming at the moment, but will it be sufficient? So we got to keep an eye on that. But quite a wide-ranging interview with Reuters, calling it and saying that we're running out of space to continue the borrowing spree that we've seen. Turning to a big announcement that came out of the Capital Markets Authority today. This has been a long time in the offing. The derivatives market, the Capital Markets Authority has granted the Nairobi Securities Exchange approval to launch the derivatives exchange market. The CEO, Mr. Odundo, will be our guest tomorrow to talk about this and other things. So do tune in tomorrow if you're interested in hearing about this. Basically follows the successful completion of a 6-month derivatives pilot test phase conducted between July and December 2018. Approval granted to the NSE to operationalize a derivatives market marks the achievement of a flagship project under the economic pillar of Kenya's Vision 2030. So that's a positive step. And I must say, we've constructed the capital markets architecture. The question now is pushing more business, more flow through the buildings that we have created. And I think that's also a skill that we need to consider. Now let's turn to Africa. Very interesting report by Andrew Koribiko, who writes a lot about the continent, and he says that Moscow is planning to create a corridor of influence across the continent. He's calling it the African Transversal, from the Sudanese Red Coast right over there, from the Sudanese Red Coast all the way across through the Central African Republic, all the way to Congo Brazzaville. And you mustn't underestimate President Vladimir Putin. His economy might only be the size of Italy's in terms of GDP, but he manages to project geopolitical power all across the world. He meddled in the election. Mueller, who was on the tape about 40 minutes ago giving his out speech, that was the special prosecutor, basically said as much. And so here we're seeing Putin making his move back into Africa. The Russians, of course, were in Africa for many years. They fought on, the side of the Angolans, the independent, the party that gained independence. They had a big presence, and they're coming back in a big way. And this is all about their dispatch of specialists to the Congo Republic, that's Congo Brazzaville, in order to maintain military equipment that Moscow's already provided them. I also wanted to point this out. Sorry, we got stuck. This is, there is a proposed bridge between Brazzaville and Kinshasa. There's the massive river that flows through between those two capital cities, and they're proposing to have a big bridge that should cross between Kinshasa and Brazzaville. And I think Raila Odinga was visiting with President Tshisekedi exactly about that story. Let's turn now to Sudan. This is the second day of the strike in Sudan. This is the leader of the Transitional Military Council. He's been on a coming out tour. He went to see Al-Sisi. He went to see MBZ in Abu Dhabi. I saw he went to see Salva Kiir, and he's gone and planted a tree with the Prime Minister of Ethiopia. If you go and visit the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, he gets you to plant a tree, as far as from what I can see. Now, second day of the strike, central bank closed, electricity, medical sector, commercial banks observed the strike. Some shops remained open. The airport in Khartoum was operating normally, they're saying in this report, though others are saying it wasn't. But we're in a very major standoff here. The protesters want these people back in the barracks. These people think that they can stay in charge, and you've got this tussle going on. And the question is, who's going to wear whom out? Behind the army, you have MBZ in Abu Dhabi, you have the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, you have Al-Sisi all ready to write big checks because they want him to prevent the street from taking power. They worry that if the street takes power in Sudan, the next thing the street will want to take power in Abu Dhabi, in Cairo, and in Saudi Arabia. So that's the forces of reaction. And then you've got the folks on the street who are trying to remove these guys and take power. They want them back in the barracks, and they call it hashtag civilian led. But so far, these guys are not budging, and we've got this standoff continuing. Let me turn now to President Magufuli. He's been visiting Zimbabwe, called for an end to the sanctions on the ZANU-PF members, and he said the embargo should be reconsidered and removed so the people of Zimbabwe can enjoy their life and develop their country, he said on Tuesday. I'm missing that image, but we'll hopefully get it in a minute. Let's now move. There we go. Sorry about that. Yes, this is Magufuli visiting Mnangagwa in Harare. And we've been talking about the challenges in Zimbabwe. I kind of think it's at the same tipping point that Khartoum was in January. Inflation has gone skyrocketing. People are very, very unhappy with the situation, and I don't understand how that situation improves anytime soon. So we'll have to keep an eye on Zimbabwe, and of course we're keeping an eye on what's happening in Tanzania as well. Turning now to President Buhari, he was sworn in for his second term today, re-elected in February. During his first term, unemployment rose from 8.2% to 23.1%. If that happened in a Western country, he would not have won his second term, that's for sure. Let me show you some key data out of Nigeria. This is Nigerian growth. That was the recession. You can see the economy contracted more than 1%. Then you got this improvement under 1%. Now we're just sub 2% GDP. This means that the average Nigerian is worse off every year under President Buhari's rule, simply because population growth is in excess of 2%. So GDP very, very weak during his term. First economic recession in 25 years in Nigeria. Okay, the oil price hit them. Nigerian stock market, third worst dollar returns globally since 2015, one of the worst in the world. There's been a slight improvement because of the listing of MTN in Nigeria. So economy in the doldrums, stock market, bottom of the league, and the Nigerian naira, triple whammy as it were, has depreciated sharply against the dollar, as you can see. And they've still got this voodoo currency difference between an official rate and an unofficial rate. So it's been a very tough time, and I just don't know. His nickname, President Buhari, his nickname is Baba Go Slow, and you saw from those data points how slow that economy is, unfortunately. The question is, does he have the wherewithal now to ignite growth, to get things going in Nigeria? I mean, you know, we know how bright and intelligent Nigerians are. They send back $22 billion of remittances every year. We get just over 2.4 billion, nearly 10x compared to us. Think about that, because that's the monetization of people's brain power. So, still complicated in Nigeria. The best performing currency in the world is the Egyptian pound. That's rallied 6% against the dollar so far this year. And that's Al-Sisi, who did the things that Buhari should have done, and he did them quick, and he's benefiting. That's why the currency is doing so well. A currency which is not doing so well is the rand. This is the rand, a 3-day chart. You can see we've moved sharply lower. We nearly got to 15 yesterday and today. And this is all about the negative feedback loop I was talking about, and a number of other things. Let me tell you what I think is going on here. Firstly, overall, we got this trade war which has gone ballistic, which Dr. Jarogi is also worried about, and that's put pressure on all the big trading partners of China. And South Africa is one of China's biggest trading partners. On top of that, we had the appointment of his deputy, and the market is not happy with the deputy because he's seen as being compromised. So, with the Rand fell 2% on Tuesday when the Deputy President David Mabuza was sworn in as a lawmaker. Markets are nervous. They've heard Ramaphosa talk the talk. They now want him to walk the talk. They're waiting to see the cabinet being delayed. The longer it's delayed, the weaker the currency is going to go. It is a kind of perfect storm, I'm afraid, for the Rand. However, if you're buying South African goods or you want to go on holiday to South Africa, this is going to be the time to do it. And it's very good value for money, I must say. Let's turn. Do you remember I was telling you yesterday about piglet prices going up 111%? Pork prices are soaring in China. Listen to this. A groundskeeper at the otherwise empty grounds of Guangzhou City fine breed pig farm. No pigs here, he said. They're all dead. Analysts say farmers in China have taken to sending entire herds to the slaughterhouse at the first sign of African swine fever, rather than report to the government because they're not getting any compensation. So you've got all these pigs being slaughtered the moment they look ill, and basically that's kept the price of pork for today or tomorrow quite low, but the forward price has gone crazy. The price of piglets, as I told you, has gone up. Of course, pork is the staple diet of the Chinese. A third of China's national pig stock, the biggest in the world, could be wiped out by this disease. And what they're saying is when the shortage hits, China will pull in pork from the rest of the world. Poorer countries from Brazil to Bulgaria will feel the squeeze from higher prices. Listen to this final comment. There simply isn't enough animal protein in the world to fill this void. So massive pig slaughter going on in China at the moment. Tony Nash, who I follow on social media, says, I sincerely hope China does not have food security issues this year, but the outlook is increasingly worrying. I couldn't agree more. And that would also add to the current stress and strain. Look at that, that's the price of a little piglet. Can you see that's gone up like 114% since I think it was in November. And we could go a lot higher given the number of pigs that are being killed as we're speaking. So piglets in demand. Turning now to the dollar. Everyone, I saw an article today, dethroning the dollar. Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, they've all tried to do something about the dollar and they've all ended up dead or dethroned. So it's not a good idea. People have been talking about it for years and years and years. It's not going to happen in our lifetime. And if I were you, I wouldn't bother betting on that, although a lot of people will tell you it's a good bet. This is the dollar index. This is an index of the dollar versus 10 other currencies. You can see that it's been going in a rising trend. We're now above 98. We were around here, 94, about a year ago. This is a one-year chart. So you can see the trend, and they say in the markets, the trend is your friend. The trend is telling you this is going higher. And frankly, I believe we're on the cusp of a staggering dollar rally. This smells like situations I remember from 1994 when the Mexican currency collapsed, 1998, the Asia crisis. It feels very, very nervous all over the markets at the moment. That's Andy Warhol, who's a very famous American artist, and he made this. This is dollar bills. He hung dollar bills. This is, I think, $1 bills, right? Look at that. Do you know how much that was sold for? That's just a bunch of dollar bills. You could have gone and done that at home. Today, it's about $50 or $60 million to buy that. Not as much as Salvatore Mundi, however. But what I'm saying is I think the dollar is going to strengthen. I think all the ingredients are there for a very big dollar rally. And if you're listening to people who are telling you it's the end of the dollar, close your ears, because it's not. They've been saying that for hundreds of years. Now, what is happening in the markets is very interesting. We've seen growth slowing down across the world. People are now getting scared of the trade war. Initially they thought, these boys are going to sit down, they're going to shake hands, it's all going to be over. And the market was priced for a benign outcome. Now they're going, hang on a second, this doesn't look like it's going to get over anytime soon. And what you're seeing is global bond yields. This is a chart of bond yields. They're at 1.13%. This is developed markets, right? Germany, Japan, the United States. So it's practically free money, right? 1.17, that's incredible. That's the lowest since December 2017. And normally that happens when people are worrying about recessions. This is Germany. Germany can borrow up to 10-year money at negative interest rates. Currently, 10-year money is negative 0.2%. If you were to buy a German bond for 10 years, at the end of 10 years, let's say you'd bought 1 million shillings, you'd get less than 1 million shillings back. Now, I want you to think about that and explain to me via social media, how can that be? How can that be that a government can borrow money and you pay them to borrow the money? Think about that. Wouldn't that be a great result for Kenya if we could get into a situation like that? Yeah, I'm sure. But that's what's happening in Germany. US, interest rates coming down as well. 10-year money is now at about 2.10, 2.15%, and people are expecting it to come towards 2%. So basically what the bond markets are telling us is that the economies in the Western markets have already slowed down, and now they're panicking that this trade war could make them come to a complete screeching halt. And that's why you've got this very strange situation in global bond markets. Let's turn now to Farage. Of course, Nigel Farage, who was very pro-Brexit, he got the highest vote. He got 31.6% of this vote in Europe. But this is interesting. Look at this. If you put the Liberal Democrats, and I'll tell you something, the Liberal Democrats, I've lived in England for a long time, haven't held power for years. They were in that sort of coalition government with Cameron very briefly. And the Greens are the environmentalists who were once very fringe. If anyone told you they were green, you would laugh at them. Today, the Lib Dems and the Greens had more votes, 32.8%, than him. And he's going around as if he's won the whole thing, all ends up. And William N. Hutton, who's a commentator, UK journalist, says, let's have a Lib Dem Green coalition ready to fight the Brexit party. And people don't really mention that. And that would be a complete turn up for the books. China is saying that their weapon that they're going to respond to against the US is going to be rare earths. Rare earths, China has practically, you can see 120,000 tons, practically a monopoly. And the thing about rare earths is that basically they're going to smartphones, they're going to military hardware, and the Chinese are now threatening a response and saying we're going to limit the export of rare earths to the United States as a response to the trade war. And what I found interesting was, look at that, Burundi, there you are, Burundi, which most of you have forgotten about, 1,000 metric tons of rare earths. I'm sure that's going to be President Nkurunziza's get out of jail card, because everyone will be coming looking for those rare earths. If the Chinese choke off supply, he's going to become a very sought after chap, I would argue. Dr. Jarogi said the trade war is gotten intense. I called it ballistic over the weekend. We've got to keep a very close eye on this because it really has become quite extreme. As I told you, I think the response, besides rare earths, will be to weaken the currency, because that way Chinese exports will be cheaper, and that way they can have some pushback with Trump. So keep an eye on the Chinese currency. I think once it breaks 7, it's going to move real quick. This is the Shanghai Composite Index, and you can see it came close to 2,000. It went below 2,900. You see, just there, and then they started buying it. And what it's turned out is, according to reports in the Financial Times, 2,900 is the line in the sand. Xi has told all his people it cannot go below that. So let's keep an eye and see whether they can hold the line, because it's not easy holding the line in the markets. But let's keep an eye on that, and you can see that they came in, they did this last week, and they've come and done it again. Now let's turn to Venezuela. Look at that. Inflation, this is their central bank, and I'm going to tell you what somebody else is saying. Is saying the inflation rate last year was 130,000%. It's impossible to even get your head around. I can't. When these numbers become that high, it means it means that for each dollar you've lost everything. You've got like maybe 0.01 left if you're talking about 130,000% inflation rate. Another gentleman who's independent is saying that the inflation rate is actually 2.296 million %. Think about that. What it is, it's an extreme situation, and it's incredible that they've survived for so long. I've been writing about it since 2017. We're in 2019 now. It's just mind-boggling. And there is definitely a correlation between high inflation and revolution. We saw that in Khartoum. We might see it in Zimbabwe. We're waiting to see it happen here in Venezuela. And I'm afraid Nicolas Maduro is going to go down just like Saddam Hussein went down, and Muammar Gaddafi. Those guys also went down because they wanted to dump the dollar, and they would, the moment they uttered those words, they were gone. So you've got to be very careful when you decide you want to dump the dollar. Let's finish off before the break in the head of my interview with the Konza CEO. Ambassador Bolton this morning, that's him with the moustache, he was in Abu Dhabi, and he said there is no doubt in anybody's minds in Washington, we know who did this, and it's important Iran knows we know. This is regarding the attacks on 4 tankers in the Fujairah port in the UAE, which were caused by naval mines, almost certainly from Iran, is what he said. It's clear that Iran is behind the Fujairah attack. Who else would you think would be doing it? Someone from Nepal? I don't know why Nepal came to his mind. There is no doubt in anybody's minds in Washington, we know who did this. And it's important Iran knows that we know. We've spoken about Iran. It's just an unprecedented amount of sanction, financial warfare has been placed on them. I told you they're hardly selling any oil. That's Ayatollah Khomeini, who overthrew the Shah of Iran, the peacock throne, which was the US's ally, and they didn't realize the Shah was going till the day before he went. And I wonder whether they really understand that the Iranian regime is quite strong, although it has been punched repeatedly. It's gone 10 rounds with Muhammad Ali, and Trump is calculating that it's just going to take a little push to push them over. And Bolton, of course, has been wanting to change that regime ever since he was a baby in diapers. This is Metropole TV. This is Metropole TV. This was The Smart Investor. My name is Ali Khan Sachu. Come back, join us after the break. We're going to have a big discussion about Konza. Is it happening? What is it? Is it a great platform to transform Kenya? And we got the CEO in the studio, and I look forward to engaging with him on that subject. See you after the break.